that if you are fasting but still gossiping, mistreating people, and lying, go on and eat. You are wasting your point of what the whole purpose of fasting is all about. So I wanted to start off tonight because not a lot, but we know that there are people who fast because it is what everybody else is doing. But I really want you to understand the true meaning of it. It's pointless for us to engage in this activity just because we know it's traditional in the month of January for people who claim to be Christians. My goal is that you dig deeper and you find, what is this all about? Because I think if you do that, then fasting will not be something that somebody just told you to do and you do it. It becomes a personal thing, and that's what fasting is all about. So again, I wanted you to kind of look at this and say, if you still doing all that stuff, and we know it's easy to do, go on and get you a big old cheeseburger tonight, because you are not engaging in what this practice is all about. Let's go to our first slide tonight. Tonight is part 3 of prayer and fasting. Again, I'm asking God to just show us something different. I feel that he's definitely been speaking to me in my personal life, in my professional life, in my spiritual life. So again, I can already tell you that it is purposeful and something that we as Christians should engage in. So let's get started. All right, so to fast, and I wanted to go back. So you're gonna see I'm actually gonna go back and say some things that you might have already heard me say before. But to fast means to abstain from all or some kinds of food or drink. Abstain from all or some kinds of food or drink, especially as a religious observance. That's pretty much what we're talking about. Now, I want you to think about it. So we know that most people connect fasting with food. That is a big part of what fasting is about. People connect it to food. But as I've tried to give you direction on, some people, if you are one that loves fruits and vegetables, it's not much of a fast for you to say, I'm just going to eat fruits and vegetables. You're doing what you normally would do. Fasting has to be a personal thing. Now, I know it's some people that they're vegetarians. So for them to say, well, I'm just eating fruits, that's not a fast for them. It could be by definition, but we're asking that you choose something that is a meaningful sacrifice. Choose something. And I want you, and I left that up there for a reason. Choose something that's a meaningful sacrifice. And on this plate, you'll see there are some things that we should fast from, especially during these times where we're trying to commune with Jesus or with God. One could be social media. We know a lot of social media takes us in our minds in different directions. I realized, and this is me being transparent, I was watching a lot of pastors and churches, and I started trying to compare myself to these other individuals that I was watching. I can't do it. Not at this point in my life. I don't need to watch people that I'm comparing myself to, because what God has given me is just for me. I'm not trying to be like somebody else, or I'm not trying to pastor a church like somebody else. God is our leader. And when God tells us what to do or what not to do, that's the instructions that I'm trying to follow, not trying to mimic something that I've seen. So for me, social media, there are certain things that I probably shouldn't look at. And I could go down other roads that many people look at. It's not good. But that is a type of sacrifice, a meaningful sacrifice. The other one, and it's not a problem for me because I haven't played a video game and I spelled it incorrectly, but it should be video games. I haven't played a video game since I was probably 13, but there are some grown people that play games more than young folks do. That could be something you decide to fast from. How about this middle one, the telephone? There are people that talk on the phone all day long. And does that allow you to commune with God? Now, of course it could. And I don't want you to say we need to just do away with the telephone. I'm not answering anybody's calls. But if that is something that you spend a lot of time doing, during your fast, you might want to add that to the list. The list also TV. We know there are shows now that you cannot watch without seeing something that is definitely not godly. Unless you're watching the shows with Andy Griffin, those black and white TV shows, today's television can take our brains into different directions that does allow us to disconnect with God. And that's not the purpose of this season that we should be in. The other one could be shopping. We know there are a lot of people that get their retail therapy. They go shopping to kind of deal with issues. And that shopping could actually happen right while you're sitting in your bed late in the middle of the night. Amazon Prime is my friend. I like ordering. I get it in 2 days right to my door. I never have to even go to a store. But during this season, I'm asking you to speak to your God. Let God have a conversation and then start reflecting on what does a fast need to look like for you. Now, we know there are fasts that you can follow. The Daniel fast. It is a fast that you can follow. It's very prescriptive. You can get on any website and they'll tell you exactly what you should eat and exactly what you shouldn't eat. But this Bible study, I want you to understand, if you don't do a Daniel's fast, if that's not what you're doing, then I need you to start praying and asking God what you should be doing. Remember, this is a private thing. It's your business. You shouldn't be really talking to anybody about what you decide to do because it has to do with your relationship with God. I hope that point is clear because some people say, well, the pastor put us on the fast. I didn't put anybody on the fast. I'm encouraging you to practice fasting. Now, the other part I want to make sure I reiterate tonight is that fasting without prayer, you just trying to lose some weight. The key of fasting is that you are going to be praying probably more than you ever have. And I told you my alarm clock is that when I feel that hunger pain, that's when I stop and I say a quick prayer. That's when I start remembering things that I said I was going to pray for somebody, or I'm praying for myself, my family, my church. So I allow that to kind of help me, remind me every time I think of food, let me start praying. Let's go to my next slide. I hope I'm making this point clear tonight, but I want you to keep in mind, just because you cannot give up food, there are some people with medical conditions and you have to eat. God gives us wisdom. Now, when your faith gets to a certain level, you can trust God to do the impossible. And that includes even doing a fast. But I don't want to get anybody, let's say, sick because you said, hey, I'm listening to the pastor and nope, God gives us wisdom. But he also knows that when we playing the games, we don't need to play games. We need to be real with God. So just because you cannot give up food does not mean you cannot participate in the fasting experience. I know somebody on the screen tonight that said, I'm fasting from certain parts of my social media. If it's meaningful and you are engaging in active prayer, you are actually participating in this experience called fasting. It is not necessarily what item you give up, but more about what that item means to you and how it reminds you to stay focused on the Lord. Everybody pay attention to that last bullet. It is not necessarily what item you give up, but it's more about what that item means to you and how it reminds you to stay focused. The key is we are trying to stay focused. We're putting on, like some of us, these glasses to allow us to see things clearly. Let's go to the next slide. So the question tonight, I want to dig deeper is, why do it? Why fast? And I told you for many years, I had my own answers to the why. And my answers did not connect back to the Bible. They were all connected to my heart. They connected to where I was mentally. Why fast? And I asked you that question tonight. And if you want to jump out there, put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Tell me why fast. And I've already taught this, so this is just a review. Why do we fast? Anybody?
To move mountains out of the way.
Move a mountain out of the way. Thank you, Pastor Rhonda Anderson. That is a great answer. To
You're
move
welcome.
mountains out of the way. I see Erica Anderson saying to get closer to God. Definitely. Anybody else? Destiny Vance, to gain clarity, breakthrough. Those are some powerful statements that I'm hearing and reading. Breakthrough. If you don't need any of that stuff, if you don't need to move a mountain, if you don't need to get closer to God, if you don't need a breakthrough, don't do it. But I challenge somebody to say, Pastor Anderson, I don't need any of that stuff because I want to talk to you. I want to know what you're doing. Because most of us need, even in those statements, all of us need those things. If it's not a mountain in your way today, it might be there as soon as you wake up in the morning. If you don't need a breakthrough today, you don't know what you're going to face tomorrow that might require a breakthrough season. So let's go to our next slide and let's see, why do we fast? And everybody gave a very appropriate answer. The first thing, and I'm going to give you 5 reasons tonight. For those who take notes, I want to give you 5 reasons. If people ask you why fast, you might already know why you're doing it. But what if somebody came up to you in the grocery store while they saw you picking out fruits and vegetables? And they said, oh, what's going on? You told them you were fasting. You should be able to give them some of these reasons. In addition to what we've already heard, the first one I want you to look at is to strengthen prayer. Now, I like that, and that's why it stuck out to me. Fasting allows us to strengthen prayer. Prayer in itself is great. We know that. We know that prayer is and I would imagine everybody on the screen at some point has engaged in prayer, whether it's just to bless the food that you are about to eat, whether it was before you go to sleep, you pray. But I know that there are people that are prayer warriors on the screen, and there are some of us that might be considered babies in prayer. But at the end of the day, prayer is prayer. I want to read text to you tonight from Ezra, the 8th chapter, the 21st through the 23rd verse, to bring this point that fasting strengthened prayer. The scripture reads, then I proclaimed the fast there in the river of Havava. If I said that right, that we might afflict ourselves before God to seek him a right way for us and for our little ones and for all of our substance. So they had a fast. They were fasting for this reason. For I was ashamed to require the king a band of soldiers and horsemen to help us against the enemy in the way, because we had spoken unto the king, saying, the hand of our God is upon all of them for good that seek him, but his power and his wrath is against all of them that forsake him. So we fasted and we besought our God for this, and he was entreated of us. This text helps us understand that in addition to prayer, fasting was kind of upping the ante. Fasting was saying, all right, we need God to do some things. A band of soldiers, the enemy is coming. The enemy is all around us. So how do we fight the enemy? We fight the enemy through prayer as well as fasting. So tonight, the first of the 5 bullets I want you to remember is that fasting helps us strengthen our prayer life. As I stated before, because I'm fasting, I am engaging in prayer more than I normally would. And I know that might sound odd, but it is a true statement. I am more conscious about praying now, very conscious. And it's not necessarily about feeling the hunger pains. It's because I'm engaging in this practice. So again, fasting helps strengthen prayer. So for people who want to say, I want to be able to pray more, I challenge you to fast. So numerous incidents in the Old Testament connect fasting to prayer, especially intercessory prayer. Fasting does not change whether God hears our prayers, but it can change our praying. It can change our praying. We know God is going to hear our prayers whether we fasting or not, but it can change our praying. Fasting is calculated to bring a note of urgency and importance into our praying and to give force to our pleading in the court of heaven. So again, if you need to be encouraged tonight, why do we do this? It can increase your prayer life. It can change the way you pray. Let's go to our second one real quick. The second one tonight is to seek God's guidance. I don't know if you need guidance, but I believe in the world that we live in, many of us were raised certain ways, we did certain things, and guess what happened after this pandemic? The world changed. Everything really has changed. The way we operate has changed. So if we're still trying to operate the way we used to, we're in trouble. Because I'm sitting in a school, I can speak to this. Children changed after the pandemic. And where we're struggling is that we're still trying to have school the way we did 40, 50, 60 years ago. And it is a totally different population that we have now. Totally different. If a 6-year-old can bring a gun and actually shoot a teacher, we all should know the world has changed. So we all should be seeking God's guidance every single day we wake up. It's not just about getting from point A to point B, but we need to be asking God, can we get from situation to situation through his divine instruction? So I want to get you Judges 20:26 to help us understand that fasting helps us seek God's guidance. It reads, then all the Israelites, the whole army went up to Bethel, and there they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to the Lord. They did it because they needed the Lord to show them something. We all need God to do something for us. There are many things that you should be asking God for divine guidance. Our medical professionals are great. Y'all hear me say it. God gave us those individuals to help us. But they can't outdo our God. I challenge any doctor to say that they can do better than our God, but they can't. They can only do what God has allowed them to do and has blessed them to do. So when we seek God's guidance, it is okay to go to counselors. I will never say don't ever go to a counselor because God has provided us with all those tools. He's given us counselors. So it is okay to go to counselors, but don't remove God from the equation. Seek God's guidance and God will direct you wherever you need to go in order to be healed. There are a lot of us that need to be healed of many issues, and it's not about being sick. But as you've heard me say, the mind, people's minds are in places that the devil know. This is how I can destroy a whole generation by just getting in their minds. Let's go to the third one because time is moving on. The third one. But before we get there, I want to say as with prayer, fasting to seek God's guidance isn't done to change God. We ain't trying to change God, but to make us more receptive to his guidance. I wanted to leave with that point. We got to be willing to receive. And sometimes we don't like the guidance that God gives us and we go doing our own thing. Fasting helps us say, if the Lord say go left and we like, nope, the best way is to go right. I know I've been going right my whole life. My mama has been going right. My grandmother has been going to the right. I got to go to the right. And God is clearly saying it's a new season. It's time to go to the left. Well, guess what fasting helps us do? Fasting helps us get to this place of saying, I'm willing to receive whatever he has in store for me. Let's go to my next one. The last one, well, not number 3, to express grief. Fasting, to express grief. Now, I found this one very interesting. I found it interesting because in 1 Samuel 31:13, the scripture reads, then they took their bones and buried them under this tree, and they fasted for 7 days. Now, you're going to understand my next slide, where I'm going to with this. So they were fasting for this season because they were grieving. Well, how can fasting express grief? Next slide for me. Expressing grief is one of the primary reasons for fasting. Now, I want you to think, have you ever been in this place? And I know I've been in this place, that when you are moved to tears by grief, you lose the urge to eat. I want you to think, I don't know if that's going to speak to anybody, that when you grieve and you don't even feel hungry. When we grieve, our family and friends often have to plead with us to eat because our body's appropriate response is to grief, is to fast. It's a natural response. That when we are grieving, it naturally happens that we have no appetite. Even though when we get to a repast and people eat, if you've noticed people that are truly grieving, they'll kind of just mess with the food. Everybody else that eat is usually the people that are there celebrating the life of the individual. So what does that mean for us tonight? And I want you to understand that we have a body that actually fasts. So for people to say, I can't do it, I don't do it, actually your body does do it. So one thing of fasting is part of expressing grief. No, all of us, if you live long enough, you will experience grief. But I hope you know who can help you get through it. Let's go to the next one. Our next one, with our last 5 minutes that we have on this particular study, I want you to know that it helps minister to the needs of others. I wanted to do this as our point because sometimes we think fasting is about me. It's about me getting close, and it is. You're communing with God. That is a point. But there's also an opportunity for you to minister to the needs of others. Isaiah 58, 3-7. Wherefore have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast, ye find pleasure, and exact all your laborers. Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Ye shall not fast as they do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Is it such a fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Is not this fast that I have chosen? Here we go. To loose the bands of the wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, that ye break every single yoke. We fast to loose the bands of the wickedness. I don't know if you see that in your personal lives, whether you working jobs, whether you hanging out in the mall, whether you getting your fruits and vegetables in the grocery store. But fasting helps loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens. This opened my eyes. So when they say what was revealed to you this week in Bible study, for me, I realized if I'm having some issues on my job, fasting is definitely helping me commune, but it's also helping me lose some of the bands of wickedness, and to let the oppressed go free, and ye break every yoke. Number 7 says, is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out of thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him. That means that fasting, we helping somebody else. A lot of people say, I'm fasting, I'm isolated. And I'm not going to knock that. But here clearly we see that fasting is also so you can minister to the needs of others. I really thought that fasting, you isolated, you're not talking much. And again, I'm not telling you, you running around being a busybody, but you are communing with God, that if God needs you to operate in a certain way, you are ready, willing, and able. It ends in that thou hide not thyself from thy own flesh. I want you tonight to know that you have to be ready to minister to the needs of others. The world needs us now more than ever. You might not realize it, but being quiet is not what God has called us to do when it comes to ministering to others. Let's hit the next slide. The next one says, number 5, to express love and worship for God. I think many of us would have came up with this one. Luke 2:37 that I want to leave with you is that, and she was a widow of about 84 years. She was, oh yeah, she was there. Which departed not from the temple. She didn't leave, but she served God. She served God. She worshiped God with fasting and prayers, not just in the morning time, not just in the evening time, but she served God with fasting and prayers night and day. My next slide for me. I want you to think about this statement. What we hunger for most, we worship. Now, I know you know the right answer is we should hunger to commune with God. Then we're going to worship. But I ask you tonight, what do you hunger for? As I gave you some of those things that was on that plate, do you hunger for TV? Do you hunger for other people? Do you hunger for video games? What do we hunger for? Because it is clear, and this statement is a fact. It isn't one of those maybe a question mark. It is a true statement that what we hunger for most, we worship. Some people hunger for other individuals, and we will find that they will worship those individuals. And when those individuals fall, guess what happened to those people that worship those individuals? Typically, they lose sight. So I want you to think tonight that we are in a place that you got to hunger for God like never before. Let's go to the next slide. Next week, we will start, how do we pray? And I just wanted you to see that, because prayer is the piece that you cannot leave out. So tonight I wanted to review, here's why we fast, here's what we're doing, but you have to connect it with prayer. If you don't, you really just kind of doing a diet. Prayer is the key. It's what separates things here. Fasting is great, but anybody can fast. I want y'all to think about it. It is a whole trend of people that fast, a whole trend, and they're not praying at all. They're doing it for health reasons. But when you fast, you need to pray. I needed you to go there, and I wanted you to understand that is the important piece that separates this whole thing. You got to pray. Now, even if you don't know how to pray, and that's what we're going to start on next week, God gives us all the direction on how to do it in the Word. The Word teaches us exactly how to pray.